Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So for some reason I didn't really film like an intro for this, so we're jumping straight in. This is the painting that I had kind of like ready for a long time for my friend, but I haven't had time to really tackle it. I think it's because I didn't really have a direction that I knew I wanted to take this painting in. But if you remember from last Monday's video, I was going to see if I could squeeze this painting in, but that video became a lot longer, probably because it was a more like real-time painting and talking video that I wanted to leave more natural, like I guess clips in rather than speeding up things with time-lapse, which I ended up doing for this one. So for a good portion of it, I will be doing it in time-lapse, but just in the beginning, I wanted to do it more in real time so you can kind of see how fast or like how the blocking in of our shadows is this time. So I mentioned earlier that I didn't have a direction where I wanted to take this, and usually it happens because I don't have an idea of flavor like atmosphere, color palette, lighting, maybe even if I wanted to paint a background, I didn't know which direction I wanted to take it in. So in this case, because I just finished the Reimu painting literally probably just like an hour or so before painting this one of Shu, I had a better idea. I ended up taking that 1 hour and just planning out a bit of the lighting on my iPad, which you saw earlier. I showed like a little kind of like gray version of Shu where I kind of blocked out our shadow and I left our white areas to show where the light's going to be coming from. I've seen a lot of artists do this in general. I've seen them do like basically blocking in all of their flats and then blocking in a general shadow on top of everything and then painting in the rest, or kind of like something similar to what I'm currently doing, but I've seen them do like gradations or like they actually block in like a purpley shadow before they paint in everything else. But the reason being that I'm starting off with more of like a yellow is that one, I gravitate towards more of like warmer colors typically when coloring, even though like preference wise I do prefer cooler colors, but like when it comes to atmosphere, I definitely prefer something that's a little bit more warm and inviting. So laying down kind of like an orangey yellow right off for the base, and you can kind of see like places where it has some of the highlights, I wanted to add a little bit extra of like a crisp darker yellowy orange edge just to make it pop a little bit more. Then we can proceed to actually painting in the normal colors for the character, which I forgot to mention. I am painting Shu. So Shu Yamino is a VTuber from Nijisan GEN, and this one is a gift for my friend. I was gonna give it to her for her birthday and send it to her, but I ended up not sending anything this year. I just did like a digital illustration for her. But because I finished the one of Reimu, I felt a little bit more confident with painting. Sometimes when I take like large breaks from painting, I feel very rusty and I make like a lot of mistakes. I don't plan things properly, but allowing myself to at least plan out the lighting gave me at least a little bit of a confident boost, and knowing that I liked the one that I did of Reimu earlier gave me a little bit more insight of how I wanted to paint Shu. So as we have kind of like a weird way of blocking in our shadows in a way, because I'm blocking in with like a very bright color, but I wanted to have enough contrast of just having the white of the page, and if anything I wanted to leave a good chunk of that yellow still popping through. So anytime we approach the right hand side closer to where we have blocked out our light, I will try my best to either fade out the color, especially if it's a darker color. I'll try to fade it out so that we can still have a lot of that warmth and that yellow coming through, which hopefully you'll be able to see once I start to approach his hair alongside with the, I guess the clothing, because his outfit is actually like fairly dark. It's more like blacks and grays. So hopefully you'll be able to see the transition from the dark color to more of our crisp golden color near the right hand side. So we are in time-lapse mode, and the reason being that I didn't mind putting this one in time-lapse, one is that I just wanted to show you guys more of the entire process, especially when I feel very proud of a piece, or at least like I don't feel like I butchered it. So this one felt really nice to just have footage of it being completed, and I don't really change the angle or anything. I think it's at an okay angle that you can view the majority of the painting. Plus, my webcam or the lighting or whatever is usually affecting it was staying pretty consistent. I also don't know if it's because my palette and maybe like something else that's like on the screen is keeping my I don't know what it's called, that's like preventing the almost like the gain or the exposure to keep changing, even though I keep fiddling with different settings to make sure that it stops doing that. But for some reason it's consistent. So during the time-lapse portion, it doesn't kind of like go in and out of being like bright, dark. So it's a little bit more easier to view. And for me, it's sometimes more satisfying to see the watercolor painting slowly come to life in this manner rather than doing just like chunks and snippets. But if you are interested in just like a full uninterrupted, I think it's like a start to finish basically of a full session of me working on watercolors, I do believe I have one of Sotheby from Reverse 1999 that I did a while ago. It's like much larger of a painting, but all the techniques that I do here, minus the lighting portion, is very similar. So like if you're interested how I mix color for skin or like I approach the hair, I think the hair on that Sotheby one is one of my favorites, just like the colors that I used, how I kind of like interpret the her ringlets as well as just the shape of it. I think it's just like well done on my part. Some other things on her, like her outfit, I think her eyes are like slightly askew, so it's not my favorite painting, but there's like parts of it that I really did enjoy. But with that being said, I think it's like a 6-hour video because watercolor typically takes me a long time. So Reimu, I think, took me an hour and a half, and it's like a much smaller painting. It's about 4x6, I believe, and I spent more time probably just letting things dry, and I took breaks in between, but I think the total elapsed time of recording, and I usually only record when I'm working on the painting, so even if I take breaks, I don't really take that in consideration. So total work time was about an hour and a half. First shoe, I think it's 2 hours and 20-ish minutes, so that's kind of like similar to how I approach the other recordings and stuff. So if I take breaks, I don't usually keep that in my recording footage. So for the most part, these paintings actually went by quite quickly. I don't know if 2 hours is like slow or fast, or like, you know, whether or not you should care about how fast you paint or how slow you paint or whatever. But I just know that within those 2 hours that I was painting Shu, I was having a blast. I did notice something a little bit strange, and I might have to look into it, but you guys will be able to see it very soon. So as I approach the right hand corner with this kind of like grayish purple color, it leaves like such a weird way of drying in the right hand corner, even just like the entire bottom section of this paper. And you can kind of see it as well when I added in kind of like that pink color at the very top left. So I don't know why it does that. It doesn't really budge after I place it down either. So usually with the watercolor paper that I work with, there is a little bit of wiggle room. I do find that cold pressed paper has more lenient in terms of being able to lift, as well as like when you're layering colors, you have to be careful of accidentally not lifting the color underneath and mixing that with your color on top if you plan to keep them like separated and you don't really want them to mix. But on hot press paper, I do think that the paper absorbs it a little bit better. So lifting usually takes a little bit more effort, but those areas that I mentioned, so like the top left corner and the bottom right hand corner, had like a weird way of absorbing the paint or like the watercolor that I was placing down, which was a little bit strange. It didn't happen as much after the first layer, I believe, so I don't know if it's like maybe I got oil on it or like maybe it's old or defective or something just over time, and me not working on it, I didn't really notice until we started painting on it today. Who knows? I don't know what's the problem. I don't really run into this too often, but I've only used like hot press paper more recently in the last few years compared to using strictly only kind of like a mixture of textured paper and then usually cold pressed paper as well. So I did pull out a reference to work on the little pape or the puppet. So basically entirety of Niji Sanji have these little puppet dolls and they're so cute. So cute. I have a few myself, but I have drawn the shoe one before. I painted one on a box when I sent the kind of like a gift to the same friend before. So I knew I wanted to draw these little puppets or something for a friend, and I forgot when I opened up this painting, I forgot that he was holding the puppet, and I was like slowly realizing that I have to paint in all the details, and I was like, why did I even draw them all? Because I don't think I'm gonna paint them very properly. And for the most part, I paint them quite flat. Initially, when I started to paint in his little face, I added in like a very brief drop shadow of like a bluish gray underneath his neck-ish area. But these little puppets are like quite flat, so I didn't really mind if they read that way also in my painting. So I don't add too much shadow here and there. I kind of just take my time to block in at least all of the flats of his color and then focus the rest of my attention onto shoe. I forgot the little string on his head. I don't know if I'll add it in. I think it's fine as is, but these little puppets are like little tiny chibi versions basically of each of the livers, which I think is super cute. I do think it might be impossible, but I want to see if I can get one of Calyx when it goes on sale. I don't know if it's possible because his popularity is very high, and I feel like people are gonna make his merch in general sell out quite quickly because he has a big fan base at this point. But we'll see, because I do regret not getting Sefina's from way before because I didn't know like NijiKR even had like the poppies at the time, and I wasn't really into like watching some of the JP or like the merged livers at that point. But I got into Sefina and I regret not getting it because her poppy is so cute. And I know I keep saying Pape, it's basically the puppet, but like they're also spelled like P-A-P-E, and I think they're pronounced as Pape, but they're just like little puppets so you can put like your finger, it's just a finger puppet basically, but they look like little 10cm dolls basically, and they're so adorable. And I really like how I ended up painting the little one of Shu. His face looks very cute and it looks, I think, accurate enough to his little puppet version, so I'm kind of pleased. I do want to make like a sticker version or something for my friend. By the time I'm recording this, I'm actually preparing packages to send out. I think I have 4 different ones that I'm sending out to friends. So I have 2 of them that are more my closer online friends. So I think Jade and Star, I'm sending stuff to you guys. I don't know which videos you guys end up watching of mine, so if I end up spoiling it this time, I do apologize. But I have like little packages for them because I just like sending and gifting things to people. I've talked about this before, but I don't know if it's like my love language or whatever, but I do like gifting things to people if I can. The other one is I bought little, I forget what it's called, like the little Plave MMMM dolls, and I bought one of Moi and his little alpaca hoodie hat, so I want to send that to another friend. And then I have one other kind of like art mutual who also loves Shu a lot, and I have an extra Shu charm, so I want to send that to her if she's still willing to accept. And I'm gonna throw in some extras for all the friends that I'm sending stuff to, so I want to make like little mini Picket fans. I think I might do stickers as well as a photo card or something. I don't know, I still have a little bit of time. I have like today and Sunday to, oh, I guess that might place when I'm recording this audio. I'm recording this on Saturday, but I'm working on like the gifts right now for them just to prepare, because I know I'm going out on Monday to do some errands, so I might as well go to the post office and drop these off while I can. So kind of talking a little bit more about the painting again. So most of the edges that are getting hit by our bright white light right here are like the warmer yellow color. I did try my best to bleed them in. Some of the darker colors, I did have to mix up a kind of like a separate yellowy orange and let that bleed in naturally with our dark colors, rather than just fading out the color all the way from, I guess, like the purpley gray, and then eventually watering it down and just go to transparent to allow some of that yellow to pop through. But then, you know, I was kind of like debating if I wanted to get things a little bit darker and darker. So eventually I started adding a little bit more shadows. But overall, I still wanted to keep everything somewhat on the light-ish side, despite having like a harsh lighting like this. But so we're actually approaching one of my favorite parts. I don't know if it really worked out in the end, but I wanted to do the kind of like purple gradation in his glasses. So starting with a purple, fairly transparent, and just doing kind of like a basic layer over top. And then after that, I will add a little bit more of a slightly darker purple to the very top, just to make it look a little bit more saturated. I was worried that because I added such a strong yellow in the very beginning, I was scared of making his eyes look too yellow, if that makes sense, because we're so used to like the sclera and like highlights, especially in stylized like anime art and stuff, being more like of a pure white. So I didn't know if it kind of looked a little bit off. I think after I added the color from his glasses on top of the eye, it did throw me off a little bit, but once we started to darken, like let's say the hair, I'll darken a little bit of the clothes, I think, and then we'll start working on the line work and make the eyes pop a little bit more forward. I think it turns out pretty okay. I did end up just darkening the hair here because I realized that his hair didn't really read as black, it just read as like a dark gray, so I wanted to deepen the color a little bit more and match his clothing, just to give a little bit more context in that case. And I kind of wish I let more of like the skin tone bleed into his hair a little bit more naturally, and then really darken kind of like the middle top portion of his crown area, just to make kind of like it have a little bit more contrast and more of a circular three-dimensionalness to it, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of doing one last thing, which is just adding a little bit of a color to the rim of his glasses. And we are working on one of the more nerve-wracking parts of doing any traditional art for myself, but it's usually the thing that ties everything together and makes the thing look more finished and pop out whenever I work on anything in this kind of manner. And what I mean is that if I ever do traditional art where I color on top of my sketch and not color within like line work, it usually means that I will do the line work at the very end, which usually like for Copic markers, I kind of do both. And then like color pencil, I do it like midway. Watercolors, I do it at the end. If I'm doing like sketching with like just water-based markers and stuff, I do line art at the very end. And as you guys know, when I do digital art, I do color on top of my sketch, and then when I'm rendering, I really darken out lines. So when I'm doing that step, for traditional art, it becomes more nerve-wracking because it's kind of the final step, but also I'm working most likely with the darkest colors on the piece, which means it's harder to lift and sacrifice anything. So if I were to accidentally make a very big mistake on his face with one of the darker purples that I'm using and having to blot it out with my brush and like a paper towel or just a normal towel, it would either leave like a very big stain, or it'll just take forever for me to kind of like fix it up and recover from it. So at this point, I'm trying to be as careful as possible. So let me talk about line work a little bit and give you a little bit of context. So in the past, I've talked about how I like to do line work, usually with a brush if I can for watercolor, just because I have full control, if I pay attention closely, of how the lines are gonna kind of like look. So in this case, if I want really super hairline thin lines, then I can achieve that with like more of a higher concentrated paint to water ratio, but I have to have enough water in my brush to make sure that it glides really thin or like really smoothly. But to get like the super thin lines, I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to the very tip of my brush and making sure that only the very tip of the hairs are touching the paper, so that if I really want to like kind of thicken out some lines, I can just press a little bit more down onto the brush and kind of get like a fatter line. But I forget which video it was where I was kind of talking about the little curly cue on the end of my brush. So the more I was using it on this one of Shu, I had really not too many problems doing the line art for him. I think the hair was kind of like behaving more properly, or I already got used to it. So my theory is that whatever video I was like low-key complaining about the brush hair, I don't know if it was on the Reimu one. It's probably, oh, maybe it was the Selwyn one. I think that's the most recent one that wasn't part of this particular batch. That the little curly cue, I don't know if it was just always been there, and because I painted more frequently, I got used to paying attention to that little hair or whatever, and being able to cope with the fact that I knew that I just had to be extra careful, keep an eye out on where it's facing so that I could get my thinner lines. So my lines are not the cleanest, but at least they're clean enough to read as like thin enough line work for my painting, so usually it's not like too much of a problem right now. But because I took such a long break from doing watercolor painting in the very beginning until like I did the one of Selwyn, which I think was this month, I don't know. It might have been just me taking too long of a break and just like low-key forgetting how to cooperate with this brush because I truly do like this brush. It's just like a number 6 round, has a nice sharp tip, holds a fair amount of water, at least for like what I tend to paint with. If I ever need like a more mop-like brush, I will switch brushes. If I need a bigger one, like my 2-inch Hake brush, I'll use that instead. But for the most part, I don't know. I'm enjoying painting a lot nowadays. So after I finish like a few gift things, finish up some projects that I'm a part of alongside with like digital art in general, I just want to paint. I truly just want to paint as much as I can. I would like to do something a little bit more ambitious, but that will require a little bit more planning on my part. And luckily, I do have the ability to plan that as much as I can digitally before I tackle it. Oh, actually, I forgot. I did do that painting of Flynn's the other day, or the other week, whichever week that was. Maybe it was that video I was talking about the little curly Q, but that one was definitely a painting that I should have done more planning and checking out like the colors in my palette and checking the lighting, because even though it doesn't look too bad at the very end, it was definitely not exactly what I was looking for. Granted, I didn't really like my sketch of Flynn's at the time when I started drawing him. But that basically takes us to the very end of today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me paint the one of Shu today. I had a lot of fun painting him, and that's why I wanted him to have his separate video from the one I did of Reimu, because I didn't want to cram one into purely a time-lapse. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me paint Shu today, and I will hopefully do more watercoloring videos in the future. So I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!